All right, well, thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to have Olyve Hallmark Abbott here to talk about the book Cinderellas of West 53rd Street, Stories from the Legendary Rehearsal Club, which she edited and contributed her own story to. Olyve Hallmark Abbott is a frequent speaker and author of Western, paranormal, and genealogical articles and books. A graduate of SMU, she attended Juilliard School of Music and turned to writing after a career in opera, musical comedy, and stage. Olyve stayed at the rehearsal club during 1955 and 56. She has competed in the Miss Senior America pageant and is a member of, a member of several Fort Worth organizations, including the Fort Worth Genealogical Society. She lives in Fort Worth and has 2 daughters. So welcome. Do you want to get started with the questions, or do you have something you want to say first?
Well, I'm glad you're here. And I have, in the past, I've had a disc replacement. So sometimes I think my voice is just going to leave. And that's something brand new for me because my voice has never left. And I can still yell just as much as I used to. So no, go ahead with the questions if you like.
All right. Well, first question, can you talk a little bit just about the rehearsal club and why it was so important to the young women trying to make it in New York?
Yes, for parents who had a daughter and they wanted the daughter to go to New York to pursue her dreams, but where would she live? It was expensive, even back in 1913. Which is the year the first rehearsal club was born. And it was founded by a deaconess, and her friend was the daughter of the Episcopal deacon in New York City. And they decided that these girls needed an economical and a safe place to live. So they scrounged together a lot of friends and got their first down payment, I would think it is, to start the rehearsal club. There were less than 30 women who lived there to begin with, but that's how it got started. And word of mouth, of course, tells everybody about, well, this is where you can stay. No, don't stay there, stay here. And that's how it got started. But if people haven't heard about it, they haven't heard about it until somebody starts to talk. And first thing you know, people knew the rehearsal club was there. It had a total safety record. I remember when I was there, even when it moved, we had we had a security guard who was there at the gate. Not the gate, but the front door. And, but I was scooting on for many years at that point because we're still back in 1913 when it first started. And then I guess that tells the beginning of it and the birth of it.
What about your personal experience with the club? You said you were there, or I guess I said you were there.
I was there in 1955 and 1956, and that was the same time that, say, Carol Burnett was there. And Blythe Danner came a little bit later, and she wrote the foreword for our book. And my detour began when I was 14 years old. And my mother and I flew to New York so that I could audition with the noted Frank LaForge, who was the operatic coach. And he suggested that I was going to stay a little while, and Mother was going to come home. And well, that was her choice. But he suggested I stay at the 3 Arts Club on West 85th Street, which was very similar to the rehearsal club. And the secretary at the 3 Arts Club was very sneaky. She just raised my age up to 15 when I was still only 14. and 15 was the age that you had to be in order to stay there. And so I stayed for 4 months, and then I came home and I finished high school. And after I finished high school, then what was I going to do? I was going to Juilliard. So I popped again on a plane with my mother, and we went to Juilliard. And I stayed 1 year, and I got very homesick because I was still awfully young. And I came home, and I went to SMU, which was a good choice, not too far. And that's where I met my first husband. No, not my first husband, my only husband. That I met him, a tall, good-looking Choctaw. And that was good. And so, but at that time he was going into the Korean War and didn't particularly want me to be a wife of a first-time soldier in San Antonio, Texas. So he said, you go to New York, do what you need to do. So I had 5 seasons with the Dallas musicals, beginning with the one that was in the band shell. If anybody's here and remembers going to the band shell, because it was outdoor theater. But the bugs were terrible, the grasshoppers were terrible. Nanette February had a June bug go down her dress. Everybody said it was a cricket, but it was a June bug. Trust me, I was right there. And
either way, it doesn't sound like any fun.
But you know, Jiminy Cricket and all that kind of thing. A cricket sounded a lot cuter. So once I went to Juilliard with the promise of a contract from the last music director at Dallas. And that was for One Touch of Venus. And he said, if you come up here, I'll give you the same role you had then. Well, my sister and her husband were going to Schenectady at the exact time that I needed to be on his show. So I hitched a ride. And while I was there, I did the one show. And then somebody had told me about Bill Bradley, who was what they called a headhunter. And they said, you might talk to him. He might have something for you on the Sid Caesar show. And I thought, oh, how do you go about doing that? Because I was still too naive to think that you just went up there and said, hey, do you think you could find a place for me? And so how is the best way to do that? Sit not too far from him, but close enough at coffee break so that we could chit chat. So we talked a while, and I still didn't have the nerve to say anything about it. So the show is over, and we had this rehearsal in some big barn of a place, and it was either Brooklyn or the Bronx, but nevertheless, it was a huge building. And the show is over, and I thought, no, I still didn't say anything to him. So I started walking out anyway, wishing I had, but I didn't. And then all of a sudden I heard this voice behind me and said, hey, Olive, wait a minute. And it was Bill Bradley. And so I stopped, and he said, I didn't tell you, but I'm a headhunter for Sid Caesar's show. If you give me your telephone number, it might be that we'd have something for you. So I did. Of course I did. So the next morning even, the telephone rang. I forgot the telephone part. I'll go back to that. The telephone rang, and it was the Sid Caesar show. And he said, Miss Hallmark, can you be up here at 11 o'clock? It's on 57th Street. And I said, yes, what do you want me to audition? And he said, well, Bill Bradley says you're okay, so you don't have to audition. So that's how I got my contract on Sid Caesar's show. But backtracking, I did backtrack, didn't I? Yes. When John Rockefeller gave two brownstones on West 53rd and 5th Avenue. He gave these buildings free to the women of the rehearsal club. And this would be the women in 1913 on West 34th Street. So all the women just moved immediately to West 53rd. It was 2 meals a day, full security. I paid $18 a week. And I made $114 per show on Sid Caesar's hour. And that just took out, well, it didn't take my whole paycheck. So I was okay. And then I kept going on and on. And then about that time, I guess I'd say not the show is over, but my husband got out of the service, and I had a choice of either coming home or staying in New York. Now, while I was in New York, I had a call. I just had gotten a telephone call for to sing the role of Flora opposite Beverly Sills in La Traviata. And that was a callback, and they were pretty sure they wanted me to do the role. It wasn't real big, but it was the principle of the thing. And then I got a call back from My Fair Lady. Well, I had already talked to my husband on the phone, and I was coming home, which I did. But the first role I had with the Fort Worth Opera Company was the role of Flora opposite Beverly Sills in La Traviata. And I thought, well, what was it? You know, you go to them or they go to you, or you don't, whatever it was.
It was clearly the role you were born for.
Was that? I suppose so. So the rehearsal club itself was just wonderful. And my room this was the director's suite. My room was across the hall from her suite. The dining room was down here you step down the stairs from the inside of the building, and that's the dining room. But my room was a room for 5 girls, and 4 of us were from Texas. And that would never happen again. It would just happen again. And of course, you think of a square with 5 girls. One long wall could take another bed in the middle of that wall. And each one of us had a bed, a desk, and a chest. We shared one bathroom, which was fine because at SMU off campus, there were 8 of us and we shared one bathroom. But upstairs at the rehearsal club, you would have the entire floor had one bathroom. You know, the kind with those pull chains. And I think maybe they probably redid all that in the years since. But everybody loved the rehearsal club, including me. And we made friends. It was camaraderie. It was like one big sorority, I guess you'd say, because you would exchange clothes. Oh, Sally, could I wear that red dress that you had on last night? I've got an audition coming up. And it was just closeness. And the memories that I had are still with me and probably always will be.
Those experiences you have, especially when you're young and following your dreams, those have to be very,
yes,
very important memories.
And sometimes it happens quicker than you think. And I just happen to be lucky. And some of the girls who were there are still doing great things.
You're right, especially You mentioned Carol Burnett. I remember reading about her in your
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
in your story, but several people whose names I think we'd all probably recognize came out in the rehearsal club. So do you want to talk about some of the bigger names?
About other names of,
I mean, Carol Burnett too. I mean,
well, sure. Carol started a show called the Review, and that just gave the girls there an opportunity to perform, and it was reviewed by the New York papers, and that gave them a good little thing that they can use in their next resume, I guess you could say. And let me see, I've got some of the names here. Now, these names may not mean anything to us, because if I didn't know who they were, they might not mean anything to me as far as what they have done. But the girls who are at the rehearsal club, so many of them have gone on, and some are choreographers or directors. They're directing TV shows in California. We have a big organization of alumni women in California. Now, I guess if I name off these names, Gail Patron, Francine Mancini, Diane Finley, Andrea Pearson, Donna Iglema, Maria Malman. Now, and these, as I say, are names that we're not going to be knowing, but they have performed in shows like Knots Landing, MASH, Law and Order, The Masked Ball, Can, and so many more. And Carol Burnett did produce and starred in the Showcase review, and that provided opportunities for the young girls to get known. And then some of them actually got a contract with an agent, because when Carol did it, it was announced pretty broadly, and a lot of people who could help came, and they helped. And Denise Pence of New York City she is the one that this book would never have been published had it not been for Denise. And she was gathering us together to see about getting a new rehearsal club, because we were out on the street at that time and everybody was still really anxious about it. And one of the girls wrote an article in the Washington Post, and people saw that, and the article had to do with equity, actors' equity, and she wanted to know how many girls in actors' equity had lived at the rehearsal club. Well, a lot of them had, and she wanted them to contact her, which they did, and that started that other ball rolling about collecting money. They raised $220,000 to get started on their new project of finding a place to live. And that is when they found the Webster Apartments, which was an apartment building for women, but not necessarily artistic involved. And they now have a wing on the 12th floor that is just for the rehearsal club. So they are still looking for a permanent, I think more like a freestanding, because as it is, it's a beautiful building. And I believe at the last report, it was $1,000 a month with 2 meals a day, Wi-Fi, washer and dryer, workshops, master classes, anything. It was just all tacked on there.
Incredible.
It was just incredible. $1,000 for a nice room is pretty nice.
Trust me, it's hard to find anywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
So the original club is no longer there, but obviously people are trying to find ways to replace it. And do you want to talk about how the spirit of the club lives on? And, some of you actually did answer most of this, but like some of the process of
Well, I
getting
think it's
women to
the fortitude, whatever that means, but fortitude and spirit and want to and stubbornness and all of those elements come into it. And that's kind of true no matter what you're trying to get involved in, I guess. But that's the way I look at it. It was just the spirit that they wanted to do this. They had to do this. They owed it to the next generation. And so that's where they are right now.
That's really amazing for people to say, I had this and I want to make it so that other women can have it coming up afterwards.
Yes.
Instead of pulling the ladder up behind you, making sure that it's available for everyone, for the next generation.
If somebody did it for me, so I'll do it for somebody else.
Right. I think that's very admirable.
I thought so. I wasn't involved in that part, but I like looking on to it.
Right. So can you talk a little bit about gathering all of the stories? Like these women have obviously gone all over the country, possibly all over the world. So how do you gather those stories and put them into a book?
Everybody has to start sometime.
Right.
So the way I would do it would be starting with the girls who were the first ones there and who are still available. Some of them have, well, not many, but so many of the girls who were there in the 1970s are still very active. I consider myself active to a certain extent. I've got, not that active, but the first one was Miss Canteen Girl, and she introduced television at the 1939 World's Fair. And I happened to be at the 1939 World's Fair. I went with a friend whose uncle and aunt invited me to go with them, or she invited me to go, and well, anyway. And so we were looking over at the RCA building, and there was a man who was talking about this new little machine. It was called television. And this Ms. Masterson was the canteen girl, and she was talking about the little machine. And the fellow said, "Can anybody here sing?" Well, I was how tall, about like that, I guess, and ham that I was, my hand shot up. And the first thing I knew, there was a microphone in front of me, and I sang "Love Is Where You Find It." Well, there was applause, and I didn't know if it was for me or for this little magic machine up there, but I just let that roll off. And she was the very first one, and she was there in 1941, I believe. And that really is a long time ago. But then the next one would jump up to the 1946, and 3 or 4 of them who have already met their Broadway in the sky had written their memoirs ahead of time just because they wanted to tell their experiences. And so at that point, then their husband or their son or somebody in their family read their memoirs. And I had just had this disc replacement, so I was a little afraid to read my own. So my daughter, Devin Masua, read mine. And it turned out just fine. This is in the audio book. And the audio book, I believe, retails for $40, I think. And so all the people have recorded or either had somebody to record it for them. So basically, to answer your question, I took it as they came. And then I came up in 1955, and then there was somebody in 58 and on until it closed in 1979 and tore it down. And now it is part of the Museum of Modern Art. And I think my daughter, Taryn, and Mike, you were there, I believe, and Allie, I think was. Yeah. And that was, and I thought we'd be sure and take a picture of where it was. Well, it's just like a big hole in the ground. It was a tall skyscraper, and that was kind of wrenching. But that's how I put them together. And I didn't put them together according to what their subject was. It was, although it sort of fell out that way because year to year to year, everything changed.
Sure. And people were, I'm sure, in the 30s, they were thinking about the things that were happening in the 30s. And then, of course, the 40s, I'm sure everybody was very affected by the wars. And then the 50s, stuff had changed again. And so everybody was thinking that way. So I'm sure even if you put them together by time, there had to be
it
themes.
still falls out that
Right.
way. And the other first girls who lived there at the rehearsal club would have a show date, not a date, but had a show that they were contracted to. And they were anxious to get home safely. And so they took their roller skates with them and put it in their shoulder bag. And then when their show was over, they put on those skates as fast as they could, and they skated all the way back to the rehearsal club. Now, I thought that was really inventive. But nobody else had roller skates. They were the only. I think there's the song about that, but I don't know. And but that's how it turned out to and it filled up a book. Now it was not I guess it's sort of the biggest part of the book, but Denise Pence Brookvar and her team put together the pictures in the front of the book and did that sort of editing, which I didn't do. I just did the editing of the memoirs, and they didn't want me to change their voices. I sure wanted to change some passive voices, but I let that go.
Oh, the English teacher.
Well, but punctuation and spelling and stuff like that. And it doesn't matter how many eyes you have looking over something that you've written. Somebody is going to find something else that, oh, how did I miss it? And it's always good that's why I like critique groups, because everybody will find something different. And then after that, have an overall editor that might check on structure that you missed. And Robin Conley is someone right in our own. She has lived here in West Texas and lives in Oklahoma now, but that doesn't keep her from editing books. And anyway, that's that on that.
Well, yeah. Is there anything else from the book that we haven't touched on yet that you wanted to tell us about? There's just so much in the book that it's hard to touch on everything.
Yeah, besides the fact that it does, it comes in paperback and hardback, and then it comes in the in this one that I just mentioned about. And we've got, let me see. No, I don't think so. The memoirs or memories, whatever, just bring in a lot of humor. And as you read it, it's different from me telling you than it is if you are reading something and I just says, oh, no, that's funny. I've got to remember that. Like the roller skates. I could not remember who had the roller skates. I looked all through this book again. Turned out it was the very first story on the second page. And
Isn't that always the way?
yeah, it's always going to be that way. But anyway, that would be about
So the last question is, what are you currently working on? Are you writing something new?
yes, I am.
Can you tell us about it?
Funny you should ask.
Oh, good.
My first 4 books were paranormal, and then I jumped off to a historical Western, and then a amateur sleuth. And they say pick one genre and stay with it, but it's kind of too much fun to say, oh, I think I want to write about that.
Like any fun.
Yeah, I got to just write something else. Because how many different books do you buy after you've read all the ones that you wanted to? And so the book I'm writing now, and it's about ready to go off to my friend I mentioned, Robin Conley. It's called Gone with the Windmills. And often I'll think of a title first and then write a book around it. But this one is made up of vignettes about things, and none is really very long, but there may be 60 vignettes, 3 to 4 pages. And it's about things that used to be and are not anymore. And that could be ration books. Raise your hand. How many know? How many in this room have ever seen a ration book?
I've seen them in
Okay.
museums, to be honest.
A ration book. Now, I don't mean green stamps. The ration book itself were usually little black stamps that you would stick off and put in your book. You got gasoline with them. You got tires, anything rubber required either 1 or how many points. Each stamp was worth X number of points. And then groceries. And when I was very little, my dad was in the grocery business. And sometimes sugar and coffee. Everybody ran out of stamps for sugar and coffee. And they would, I remember one lady who was a really good customer would say, Mr. Hallmark, did you have anybody turn in a sugar stamp that they weren't going to use? Well, that was illegal to give them, but if somebody had, he would. I mean, it's just there. And if they needed, and it was the end of the term, so they needed some more sugar to bake their daughter's birthday cake or whatever. And that would be, that was a ration book. Now I want to get you on this one. What about, well, clotheslines? They still have clotheslines. Dryers are not the only thing in the world, but my neighbor used to have a clothesline. It was one of those big square ones. And once they put the sheets up on there, the kids would run around and the wet sheets would slap them in the face and couldn't hurt. Then this is a good one. And the vintage permanence for my lady's hair. And by vintage, I'm going way back to where, okay, so you've got the curlers. Now, well, you know what electric curlers are because we had those in boxes, and that wasn't all that many years ago. But this would be an electric curler. You would clamp it on your hair, and on the end of that curler was it was just an electric cord. Each one had an electric cord. Then they all plugged in to one basic place. And
that sounds safe.
I wanted a permanent, and I wanted to use that kind of a permanent. And so my mother took me to her, well, we called them beauty parlor operators in those days. And so she had one in the back of her shop, but she never had used it. So she said, well, I'll bring this out. It still works, so use it. So she brought it out, and she was getting me all hooked up. And I said, oh, I'm so thirsty, I need a drink of water. She said, oh no, you can't have any water, not with these electric curlers in your hair. So then it was getting kind of stuffy. I was sitting on one of those little boards like little boys sit on to get their hair cut. And so she said, it's getting a little stuffy, I'll open the front door. So she went out to open the door, and just the same time she did, the thunder and the rain just came booming down. And she just threw up her hands and she ran back to me and she started jerking out these electric curlers. She knew I was going to get split ends the hard way. And so anyway, I was beautiful after that. I stayed beautiful for about 6 months until the curl left. But nevertheless, that was quite a memory that had nothing to do with the rehearsal club. And then, did anyone here ever go to this? Did I ask this already? Go to the Starlight Operettas in Dallas when they were in the band shell? They had the band shell, which was built like a huge half shell. And the shows were always outdoors like that. That was when Nanette Fabre got the bug down her dress because it was outside. And after they had how many years of that? Quite a few years. I did 2 years when it was outside, and then I skipped a couple of years, and they moved the shows inside in 1950 because it was hot outside, and they air conditioned the big auditorium in Dallas. And they also had a swimming pool over by the band shell. And a lot of us would get up early in the morning and we would go for a swim before we went to rehearsal, say like at 10 o'clock. And we would go for a swim before we left. And I remembered I was doing a show called Wish You Were Here. And that show had a swimming pool built into the stage. It was that way in New York as well, and it's this way in Dallas. And I was billed as the girl swimming diver, or was it the diving girl swimmer? It doesn't matter. So I hit the high C on the diving board, dove into the water, swam the length of the pool, and I came up still holding on to the high C. Now you can believe that if you want to, but actually I grabbed that note on the way up the stairs, and it went boing. And so the audience, it really did look like that happened. But when we went swimming, I remember I had a swimming suit of flowers, white and green and pink. And later on I saw, and of course we would suntan, and later on I thought, oh my gosh, look, I bruised myself. Well, it turned out that was just the sun coming through on the white part of the swimming. I thought I was really in deep trouble, that I had some sort of a disease or something. But that was the band shell, and it is gone now, but not forgotten by everybody who had either seen a show there, and they had a lot of outdoor shows. They had the I can't think of the name of it, but it had lots of Indians and a lot of feathered costumes. And then it started to rain at intermission on the last show of the run. And they had to pack up all those wet feathers and send them back to Brooks Brothers in New York. And that was really kind of too bad, because if it went to intermission, the audience didn't get their money back. And my parents went to see their little daughter in that show, and they didn't get their money back. But the Gone with the Windmills is my, and then I think the question has, or your endeavor. And my endeavor is to get my atrium ready for spring.
Oh, I understand the feeling. So you're a gardener?
Yes. Maidenhair fern mainly. If you want some, I can give you some.
I was telling you before, I have a black thumb. It's terrible.
Oh.
But that's all the questions I have. So now is time for questions in the room or from the audience online. Just really quick before we start. For those joining us on Zoom, just feel free to put your questions in the chat. And we have somebody monitoring the chat in the back. Hi, Jana. And she will, we'll check in with her between questions, and she will tell us what the question is, and we'll be able to answer it from here. All right. So does anybody in the room have a question, or is there anything already available on the chat?
So the book is out now. I can have to go to Barnes and Noble.
Could hear.
This book is out now. She could buy it at Barnes and Noble.
Oh, yes, yes. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever.
What was it like? What was it like to go to Juilliard?
Where's my what?
What was
Juilliard.
Juilliard like?
What was it like to be there?
Oh, it was on 122nd Street at the time. Now it's moved now and has been moved for quite some time. But I guess sort of to answer your question, I'd enter the side door and there was always a guard standing there for the students to go in and then check your name off. And I remember one thing about that, he always said, "Where's your babushka?" And I thought, what is the babushka? And I had to look that up, and it was some kind of a scarf. And she just thought, he thought I should always have one, which I didn't. But the school itself was very nice. And you would just go from one classroom to another, or to your voice lesson, to the next class. And depending on what subjects you were taking, was depended on how much fun it was.
How old were you then?
Okay, by that time I was 16, I think.
Were most of the students that age, or
No.
No, you were. Was that unusual for you to be?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
How did you get into Juilliard?
I auditioned,
Okay.
and it was just a place I'd always heard of, and I just wanted to go.
Yeah. So your family was in Wichita Falls then?
Yes.
Yeah. So Wichita Falls to Juilliard. Wow, that's pretty awesome.
And the park was right across the street, and I was very frugal at the time as well. And we had a neighbor who was very good baker, made cookies and brownies and stuff like that. And she was always sending me food, so I wouldn't eat it at home. Of course, I could eat at the Three Arts Club, fine, but I always wanted just to save a little bit more on the side. So
One more question. Did your parents encourage you into music? How did you know that you could sing so well? I mean,
when I was in Crockett Elementary School, my choir teacher suggested to Mother that I take voice lessons. She said, I didn't know what this meant. She said, she has resonance. And I thought, residence? And so we had a voice teacher who was pretty well known in Wichita Falls at the time. And his wife was a piano teacher. So I took piano from her and voice from him. And that's how I got started. And then we had a state competition for kids. And that was good. So that's sort of answers your question, I guess.
Do we have anything online?
We do. Do you have any advice for aspiring artists?
Do you have any advice for aspiring artists?
Do I have any what?
Advice for aspiring
Advice?
artists?
Well, again, I think if you are really that serious about it, then you need to take the next step. And I would be hopeful that your parents would be in favor of it. And if you're a singer or a pianist or a dancer or an artist, keep going at it. Just don't give up because you think, oh, I'll never be good. If you've got the desire, then keep going with it. So I guess that would be my last comment. Just stay with it.
Keep with it. Do you have any advice for aspiring authors?
Oh, sure. Aspiring authors, my first thought would be to find a good group. You don't know it's good until you're there, unless you've heard a lot of good comments about it. But a writers group, and you've already told me we have several in the area, and I didn't know about 2 or 3 of them.
Fort Worth Library has writers groups if you're interested. This branch right here has a really great writers group.
And it's called Right.
Right on, right on, right on. We're very Matthew McConaughey around here.
Yeah, I think. And the one I belong to is Fort Worth Writers. And now her meeting is here. On what day, a night, when?
That's a good question. I
Oh.
don't run it. One of the librarians.
Oh, okay, well, then they can call
What
the
is it? Monday evenings.
Monday evening. And I just live a block and a half. I may drop by. But, the one I belong to meets on Saturday morning at Westminster Presbyterian Church on Alta Mesa, at the corner of Alta Mesa and Trail Lake. And the groups, I think most of them are critique groups where you bring X number of pages, say like 5 pages, enough for everybody. If you think you're going to have 15 people there, then bring enough that everybody has 5 pages. And then that person who brought them will stand and read his 5 pages aloud. And then you start with the next person going around and they make their comments. And I think yours probably does the same way, and most of them. And they make their comments. And then if you run out of time, you write it on the paper. Write it on the paper anyway. If you have more to say than you can verbalize. And if you get one thing out of a writer's Saturday morning or Monday evening, it's worth being there. Now, some of them you might say, oh, what are they talking about? But, well,
That's
that
true
was
of most
rude.
criticism.
That was rude. But you're not going to accept all of them. But you don't know until you write it down and then read it out loud. And maybe, well, that's not so bad. I think I like that after all.
I'll say the one here is so friendly and supportive that they started coming in and out of early.
I can't hear from
What
you.
she said was that the group that meets here, they've gotten so friendly and they like each other so much. They've started coming an hour early to
Oh,
kind of hang
please.
out and socialize before writing
Okay.
club starts.
You serve refreshments?
I don't know.
But we'll have a board meeting whenever a board meeting is due. And usually everybody brings their favorite little goodie. And that's usually at a board meeting or some extra special.
Do we have any other questions?
There's an old movie, I gotta be careful when I use the word old, like it's 1937, it's called Stage Door.
Oh, yes, yes.
Are there similarities to your experience in the boarding house?
The George Kaufman and, oh, what was their name? Slipped my mind. But they had the movie that starred Ginger Rogers and Rita Hayworth. Was Rita Hayworth in that?
Might have been Lucille Ball, Eve Arden, Catherine Hepburn. I mean, a lot of them were young.
Yeah,
But they were,
yeah.
you know, just
and that
probably a
was
little more drama than maybe we.
probably so, but it was taken from the rehearsal club.
Oh, really? Okay, that's totally related.
Yeah, and they had a play first before they had the movie,
Oh, okay.
and that was kind of nice. That was nice to know. I think it helped the interest back in the day when the movie, 1938 or something.
Yeah, 37, I think it said on my phone.
Oh,
So wasn't there a billboard like right across from your room?
yeah.
The bulletin board
Bulletin
across
board,
from your
outside the
room.
bulletin board.
Oh, yeah. The telephone was right outside my door, and then the bulletin board was right across from the telephone. And our house mother would put free show tickets for those of us who signed up for them first. And there weren't a lot of them, so you had to be pretty quick. And like I say, I was right outside the bulletin board. But and the telephone was a wall phone, and it was the only one on that side of the building. And since I was just like this, and the boing, the telephone rings, I'd jump up. I never knew, perhaps it was going to be an agent asking for me. No, it would be an agent asking for somebody. And it would just, well, that was what one telephone would do. They really, I think they had another one in the building somewhere.
Imagine a world where there was only one telephone with that many girls.
Yeah. And there were no more than 40. But when somebody would come in, and you did have a waiting list, but whenever somebody would come in and there wasn't a bed, and she just looked so forlorn, and the house mother would say, well, do you have a place to stay tonight? And she, no. And she said, well, I'll put up a cot for you in room whatever. And then she usually became a permanent resident by that time. But our house mothers were always just really sweet and understandable, and it was like a dorm. I guess it was, except they had more activity going on in it.
Sure.
And as I say, everybody was borrowing clothes, and that was fine, because if somebody borrowed it from you, you could borrow it from somebody else. So it was fine.
I'm curious to know, do you have a daily writing habit? And if you do, have you done that for a long time?
Do you have a daily writing habit, and how long have you done it for?
I had my first book published in 2001. And then when I branched out, I started doing speaking engagements, and then going to book fests. And that's when you can, if you bought all your books, then you can sell your books there and make some money at that. And I think just start writing, and if you don't like the way it's going, you don't have to like it. You can think, I think I'll go to something else, but I'll save this one over here. I might get back to it later. But again, if you have a genre that you really like, then stay with it. At least stay with it until you get your first book published in that genre. And I got published my first paranormal book as I went to a conference in Denton, and the lady there was really giving us gung ho, and everybody got really excited about it. And then all of a sudden she said, I'm looking for somebody to write a book about haunted graveyards. And nobody accepted that. And so then I started thinking about it going home. I'd been to graveyards in genealogy, but never a haunted one that I knew of. And I called her after I got back home. I called her and I said, "Are you still looking for somebody to write a book about haunted graveyards?" "Yes." And I said, "Well, I'd like to give it a try." So I did, and I wrote Ghosts in the Graveyard. And strangely enough, it is still my best seller. I guess it just, you stay with it and you travel a lot and go to a lot of cemeteries and you talk to a lot of people. And at a book fest where everybody has their books, you can say, the opening line on that, which I always found that worked, was, "Have you seen a ghost lately?" And first thing you know, they start telling me about the ghosts in their grandfather's house. One thing leads to another. But if you have a gimmick in a way about what it, well, it doesn't have to be ghosts, but it seemed to work pretty well with ghosts.
So how did you choose paranormal for your first books?
Just because I went to that,
Just because of that, somebody
Uh-huh.
saying they needed
and
a
she
ghost
said,
story?
yeah. So then I wrote a ghost, well, it was about ghosts in bed and breakfast. It was like a ghost in the guest room. And I thought it was just as good as Ghosts in the Graveyard, but it didn't sell nearly as well. And I thought, well, let me see. I thought I was just as clever in that one as I was the other one. And maybe so, and maybe not. But the point was, I figured it out. You go to a haunted graveyard, you don't have to pay to go to a haunted graveyard, but you're going to go to a haunted bed and breakfast or somewhere, you're going to have to pay to go into room 215 and spend the night and then wander. So I figured that almost had to be it. That may not have been it. I'm just thinking it may had to have been it. And so anyway.
Any other questions?
Well,
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about? Otherwise, we can.
I can't, I think let me see, we covered this, we covered that. I had a detour, the famous actresses. Okay,
Are some of the proceeds going towards something when it comes to the sale of that rehearsal book?
what?
Are the proceeds for the sale of the book going anywhere?
Oh, are these books selling anywhere?
The money from when you sell these books?
Oh, well, to me, I sort of in my contract, I signed out to have any money that was made off of it to go back to the rehearsal club, which is what we do sometimes.
Yes.
Now, if I go to a book fest, I can buy my books that way, and then I can sell them at a book fest for whatever I want to.
All right, well, thank you all for joining us. We thank you for coming to the Fort Worth Public Library. Sorry, I actually have a little script here. So at the back near the door, we have surveys to fill out. Please fill one out. Tell us what kind of programs we here at the library can offer to you. For those of you on Zoom, you'll get an email tomorrow with the same survey to fill out. So thank you all for joining us. We have recorded today's presentation, and you should find it on the YouTube channel, the Fort Worth Public Library YouTube channel, in a few days. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel and you'll get notifications about it. Again, thank you all so much for spending time with us today.
And thank you.
Thank you for coming out.